The sun cast long shadows over the dusty streets of Shoshone City, Wyoming, when Zara Taylor felt the rough hemp around her wrists tighten as the horse lurched forward. The year was 1876, and death had never felt so certain as when her body hit the ground, dragging across the parched earth behind the spooked Mustang. The world became a blur of pain and dust, her screams lost in the thundering hooves and shouting men. Just as consciousness began to slip away, she heard another set of hoofbeats approaching faster. Determined and through dust-filled eyes saw a figure leaning impossibly from his saddle, knife glinting in the harsh sunlight. Isaac Calloway had been riding back to his small ranch outside Shoshone City when he spotted the commotion. Without hesitation, he dug his spurs into his stallion's flanks, urging the beast to speeds that would have terrified a lesser rider. As he closed the distance, his heart hammered against his ribs at the sight of a woman, bloody and limp, being dragged behind a panicked horse. In one fluid motion, born from years on horseback, he pulled alongside, leaned down with his hunting knife extended, and sliced through the rope in mid-gallop. Zara felt the sudden release as her body tumbled to a stop, the relief of no longer being dragged mixed with the agony of her injuries. Through swollen eyes, she watched her rescuer bring both horses under control before dismounting and rushing to her side. "Miss, can you hear me?" Isaac knelt beside her, his voice tight with concern. His hands hovered above her, unsure where to touch without causing more pain. "I'm alive," Zara managed, her voice barely a rasp. "Thanks to you." Isaac gently brushed the dust and blood from her face. She was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with features that would have been striking even without the bruises and gashes that now marred them. Her honey-brown hair had come loose from its pins, and her once fine dress was torn and bloodied beyond repair. "I need to get you to the doctor," Isaac said, carefully gathering her in his arms. "What's your name?" "Zara Taylor," she whispered, before the pain overtook her and darkness claimed her consciousness. The town doctor's office was a humble two-room affair on the main street of Shoshone City. Dr. Frederick Miller looked up from his desk as Isaac burst through the door, the limp form of Zara cradled in his arms. "Good Lord, Isaac! What happened to her?" The doctor immediately cleared his examination table. "Found her being dragged behind a horse outside town, rope tied around her wrists." Isaac laid her down as gently as possible. "Cut her free, but she's badly hurt." The doctor began examining Zara, his experienced hands moving efficiently. "Her back's been torn up something awful, dislocated shoulder, possible broken ribs. Who is she?" "Said her name is Zara Taylor before she passed out." Dr. Miller's eyes widened slightly. "The Taylor girl? From back east?" He shook his head. "What in heaven's name was she doing out there?" Isaac paced the small room, his hat clutched in his hands. "You know her?" "By reputation only. Word is she arrived last week on the stage from Philadelphia. Her father died and left her some property near here. That's all I know." The doctor pulled out a bottle of antiseptic. "I'll need to clean these wounds." "You might want to step outside." Isaac nodded but found himself reluctant to leave. "Will she make it, Doc?" The older man sighed. "She's young and seems strong. If infection doesn't set in, she's got a good chance." He gave Isaac a curious look. "Since when are you so concerned about strangers, Calloway?" Isaac didn't answer. Instead, he stepped outside into the fading daylight, his mind full of questions. Who would tie a woman to a horse? And why? He settled on the doctor's porch, determined to wait until he had answers. Sheriff Thomas Blackwell found him there an hour later. "Heard you brought in a half-dead woman," the sheriff said, leaning against the porch railing. Isaac nodded. "Zara Taylor. Someone had tied her to a horse, left her to be dragged to death." "Any idea who?" "No. By the time I saw her, there wasn't anyone else around, just her and the horse." The sheriff removed his hat, revealing graying hair. "That's the third strange incident this month. First Daniel's place getting burned out, then Miller's cattle being slaughtered, now this. You think they're connected?" "Don't know yet, but I aim to find out." The sheriff straightened. "The girl's awake. Doc says you can see her if you want." Isaac stood quickly, brushing dust from his trousers. Inside, he found Zara propped up on the examination table, her face pale but alert. Her Her wounds had been cleaned and bandaged, and she wore a borrowed nightgown that hung loosely on her frame. "Mr. Calloway," she said when he entered. Her voice was stronger than before, but still held the edge of pain. "Dr. Miller tells me I owe you my life." Isaac removed his hat, suddenly aware of how dusty and unkempt he must look. "Anyone would have done the same, Miss Taylor." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "We both know that's not true." She winced as she shifted position. "Thank you for cutting me free. Do you remember what happened? Who did this to you?" Zara's eyes clouded. "I was riding out to see my father's property. 2 men stopped me on the road. They asked if I was Benjamin Taylor's daughter." Her hands trembled slightly. "When I said yes, they dragged me from my horse, said I should go back east where I belonged." "Did you recognize them?" She shook her head. "They wore bandanas over their faces, but one had a scar here." She traced a line across her forehead. "And the other called him Jed." Isaac's jaw tightened. "Jed Morris. Works for the Diamond Bar Ranch. You know him?" Unfortunately, Isaac moved closer to her bedside. "Miss Taylor, the Diamond Bar is owned by Victor Harrington. He's been buying up all the land around here for years. If your father owned property nearby..." "Then Harrington probably wanted it," she finished. Dr. Miller entered with a tray of medicines. "That's enough for now. Miss Taylor needs rest." Isaac reluctantly stepped back. "I'll check on you tomorrow, if that's all right." Zara nodded. "I'd like that, Mr. Calloway." Outside, night had fallen over Shoshone City. Isaac mounted his horse, his mind heavy with thoughts of Zara Taylor. Instead of heading home, he turned his horse toward the sheriff's office. Something had to be done about Victor Harrington, and Isaac intended to make sure justice was served. The next morning dawned clear and cool over Shoshone City. Isaac had spent a restless night at the small hotel in town, unwilling to return to his ranch until he was certain Zara was out of danger. After a quick breakfast at the town's only cafe, he headed to Dr. Miller's office. He found Zara sitting up in bed, color returned to her cheeks, despite the bruises that had darkened overnight. Her honey-brown hair had been brushed and plaited, and someone had brought her a simple blue dress to replace the ruined one. "Good morning, Miss Taylor," he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway with his hat in his hands. "You're looking better today." Zara smiled, the gesture transforming her face despite the injuries. "Good morning, Mr. Calloway. Dr. Miller says I'm healing well, all things considered." Isaac stepped into the room. "I spoke with Sheriff Blackwell last night. He's going to question Jed Morris, but without any witnesses." "It will be my word against his," she finished, her expression hardening. "I understand how these things work, Mr. Calloway, even in Philadelphia. Call me Isaac, please." He sat in the wooden chair beside her bed. "The sheriff also told me about your father's property. It's a good piece of land, about 10 miles southwest of town. Has its own creek running through it." Zara's eyes lit up. "You know it?" "I've ridden past it many times. It borders my own small ranch." He hesitated. "Miss Taylor." "Zara," she corrected with a small smile. "Zara." Her name felt right on his tongue. "You should know that Victor Harrington has been trying to buy that land for years. Your father refused every offer. That explains why I received so many telegrams from Mr. Harrington before I even left Philadelphia." She sighed. "He offered to buy the property site unseen, for much less than it's worth, I suspect. Harrington wants to control all the water in the valley," Isaac explained. "He's already bought or forced out most of the small ranchers." Zara's expression grew determined. "Well, he won't force me out. I came here to start a new life, and I intend to do just that." Isaac found himself admiring her spirit. Many women would have been on the first stage back east after such an ordeal. "It won't be easy," he warned. "Ranching is hard work, especially for someone alone." "I'm not afraid of hard work, Isaac." Her blue eyes met his, unwavering. "My father raised me to be independent. He taught me to ride, to shoot, to handle accounts. I may be from Philadelphia, but I'm not some delicate flower who wilts at the first sign of trouble." Isaac couldn't help but smile. "I believe you, but Harrington is dangerous. What happened to you yesterday proves that. All the more reason I can't give in." She adjusted herself on the pillows, wincing slightly. "Dr. Miller says I'll need to stay here for at least another week. After that, I intend to see my property and start making it my home." Isaac hesitated, then made a decision. "I'll help you." Zara looked surprised. "You will? Why?" It was a fair question. Isaac was known throughout the county as a man who kept to himself. After returning from the war 11 years ago, he'd bought his small ranch and rarely ventured into town except for supplies. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because I've wanted to see Harrington get his comeuppance for a long time." What he didn't say was that something about Zara Taylor had awakened feelings he thought long buried. Her courage, her determination, her quiet dignity in the face of suffering. They all spoke to him in a way no one had in years. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll find a way to repay you." "No need." He stood, placing his hat back on his head. "I'll come by tomorrow. Is there anything you need from town?" "Some paper and a pencil, if it wouldn't be too much trouble. I should write to my aunt in Philadelphia, let her know I've arrived safely." She gave a wry smile. "Though perhaps I'll leave out the part about being dragged behind a horse." Isaac chuckled. "Probably wise." "I'll bring them by this afternoon." As he left the doctor's office, Isaac felt lighter than he had in years. The prospect of helping Zara gave him purpose. And if it meant standing against Victor Harrington and his thugs, well, that was just an added benefit. His good mood lasted until he reached the general store, where he found Sheriff Blackwell in a heated conversation with the storekeeper. "What's happening?" Isaac asked, approaching the two men. The sheriff turned, his expression grim. "Just got word. Jed Morris was found dead this morning, shot in the back out near Cottonwood Creek." Isaac frowned. "That's convenient timing." "Too convenient," the sheriff agreed. "And now Harrington's saying it must have been the Taylor woman who did it, claims she's out for revenge." "That's ridiculous," Isaac snapped. "She can barely stand, let alone ride out and shoot a man." "I know that, but Harrington's stirring up his people, says she hired someone to do it, maybe you." Isaac's hand instinctively moved to the gun at his hip. "I was in town all night. You saw me at the hotel." "I know, son, but facts don't matter much when Harrington starts spreading his poison." The sheriff sighed heavily. "I'd advise you to be careful. Both of you." Isaac nodded, his mind racing. If Harrington was blaming Zara for Morris's death, it was likely because he'd ordered the killing himself, eliminating a loose end who could connect him to the attack on Zara. "I need to warn her," Isaac said. "I'll come with you," the sheriff offered. "She should hear this from me officially." Together, they walked back to the doctor's office. Zara took the news calmly, though Isaac noticed how her hands gripped the bedsheets tightly. "So, Mr. Harrington has eliminated the man who could implicate him, and now he's trying to blame me for the murder," she said. "It's almost admirable in its ruthlessness." Sheriff Blackwell shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Taylor, I don't have any proof that Harrington ordered the attack on you, or that he had anything to do with Morris's death." "Of course not. Men like him never leave proof." She looked at Isaac. "What do you suggest I do?" "For now, focus on getting well," he said. "I'll keep an eye on things. And when you're ready to see your property, I'll take you there myself." The sheriff cleared his throat. "Miss Taylor, it might be safer if you sold the land and returned east." Zara's blue eyes flashed with determination. "Is that what you'd advise a man to do?" "Sheriff, run away?" The lawman had the grace to look abashed. "No, madam." "Then please don't suggest it to me." Her voice was polite but firm. "This is my home now. I won't be chased away." After the sheriff left, Isaac remained. "Harrington won't stop," he warned. "I know." Zara met his gaze steadily. "But neither will I." In that moment, watching the sunlight cast a golden halo around her determined face, Isaac Calloway realized he was in serious danger of falling for Zara Taylor. The next 2 weeks passed in a steady rhythm. Each morning, Isaac would ride into Shoshone City to check on Zara, bringing her books from the small town library or wildflowers he'd gathered on his way. In the afternoons, he would return to his ranch to tend his small herd of cattle, always watchful for Harrington's men. Zara's recovery progressed well under Dr. Miller's care. By the end of the second week, she was able to walk around the doctor's office without assistance, though her injuries still pained her. The rope burns around her wrists had begun to heal, leaving red marks that would eventually fade to scars. During his visits, Isaac found himself sharing more of his past than he had with anyone in years. He told her about growing up in Ohio, his service in the Union Army during the Civil War, and his decision to head west afterward in search of peace. "I'd seen enough killing to last several lifetimes," he explained one afternoon as they sat on the doctor's small porch. "Wanted a quiet place where I could live simply." "And did you find it?" Zara asked, her eyes soft with understanding. Isaac smiled ruefully. "For a while. Then Harrington started buying up land and pushing people out. It's been anything but peaceful since then." In turn, Zara told him about her life in Philadelphia, where she'd helped manage her father's shipping business after her mother's death. "Father always treated me as an equal," she said. "Taught me everything about the business. The other merchants thought it scandalous, but he didn't care. He sounds like a good man." "He was." Sadness flickered across her face. "He talked about this land often, said it was the most beautiful place he'd ever seen. He wanted to retire here someday." "Why didn't he?" "Mother's health was poor. She needed Philadelphia's doctors." Zara's fingers absently traced the fading marks on her wrists. "After she passed, he kept delaying the move. There was always one more business deal to complete. Then last winter, he caught pneumonia." Isaac covered her hand with his own. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." She smiled at him, and Isaac felt a warmth spread through his chest. "In his last days, he made me promise I would see his land. Make a decision about it for myself, rather than just selling it, sight unseen. And now that you're here, now I'm more determined than ever to stay." Her blue eyes sparkled with a mixture of defiance and excitement. "Dr. Miller says I can leave his care tomorrow. I want to see my property, Isaac. Will you take me there, as you promised?" "Of course," he replied, though concern gnawed at him. Harrington had been quiet these past weeks, too quiet in Isaac's experience. "We'll leave at first light." The next morning dawned clear and cool. Isaac arrived at the doctor's office just as the sun was peeking over the eastern hills, leading a gentle mare he'd borrowed from a neighbor for Zara to ride. She was waiting on the porch, dressed in a practical riding skirt and jacket. Her honey-brown hair was pinned up under a wide-brimmed hat, and Isaac noticed she wore a small pistol at her waist. "My father's," she explained, catching his glance. "He insisted I learn to use it before I left Philadelphia." Isaac nodded approvingly. "Good. I hope you won't need it, but it's better to be prepared." He helped her mount, careful of her still healing injuries, then swung up onto his own horse. They set off at a leisurely pace, heading southwest out of Shoshone City. The day warmed quickly as they rode across the rolling Wyoming landscape. Spring had painted the hills with wildflowers, and in the distance the mountains stood blue against the horizon. Isaac pointed out landmarks as they traveled a distinctive rock formation, an old trapper's cabin, the creek that would eventually run through Zara's property. They stopped to rest at midday beneath a stand of cottonwood trees. Isaac spread a blanket on the ground and unpacked the lunch Mrs. Peterson from the hotel had prepared for them, fried chicken, biscuits, and apple pie. "It's even more beautiful than Father described," Zara said as they ate, her eyes taking in the vast landscape. "Wait until you see your land," Isaac replied. "It's some of the prettiest in the county." After lunch, they continued their journey. As they crested a final hill, Isaac reined his horse to a stop. "There it is," he said, pointing to the valley below. "The Taylor property." Zara gasped. The valley spread before them like a green carpet, bisected by a silver ribbon of creek. A small cabin stood near the water, surrounded by meadows that stretched to distant tree-covered hills. "It's perfect," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "Absolutely perfect." They rode down into the valley, Zara's excitement growing with every step. When they reached the cabin, Isaac helped her dismount. The structure was simple but solid, a one-room affair with a stone fireplace and sturdy log walls. "Your father had it built about 5 years ago," Isaac explained as he pushed open the door. "He'd come out here whenever he visited Wyoming." Inside was dusty but otherwise well-preserved. A bed stood in one corner, a table and chairs in another. Shelves lined one wall, holding books, tools, and supplies. Zara moved through the space slowly, touching items her father had touched, absorbing the reality of her inheritance. "I can live here," she said finally, turning to Isaac with shining eyes. "I can make this work." It'll be hard, he cautioned, especially alone. I won't be entirely alone. She smiled at him. I'll have a neighbor, won't I? Isaac returned her smile, warmth spreading through his chest. You will. They spent the afternoon exploring the property. Isaac showed her the best spots for growing vegetables, where her father had planned to build a larger house someday, and the natural corral formed by rock outcroppings, where she could keep horses. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, they reluctantly prepared to return to town. Zara cast one last longing look at the cabin. I'll be back soon, she promised, as much to herself as to the property. They were about halfway back to Shoshone City when Isaac noticed dust rising in the distance. Riders moving fast, coming from the direction of town. Trouble, he muttered, reining his horse to a stop. He pulled his field glasses from his saddlebag and focused on the approaching group. Harrington's men, 6 of them. Zara's hand moved to the pistol at her waist. How did they know we'd be out here? Someone in town must have told them. Isaac scanned their surroundings, assessing their options. They were in open country with little cover. We can't outrun them, not with your injuries. Then we stand and face them, Zara said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Isaac admired her courage, but he knew the odds. 6 men against 1. With Zara still recovering from her injuries, it wasn't a fight they could win in a straight confrontation. There's a place nearby, an old line cabin I used during roundup. He pointed to a rocky outcropping about a quarter-mile east. It's defensible. We can make it there before they reach us. Zara nodded, and they urged their horses toward the shelter. The cabin came into view just as the riders crested a hill behind them, a small stone structure built against the rocks, with a clear view of the surrounding area. They dismounted quickly, leading the horses behind the cabin where they wouldn't be visible from the approach. Isaac helped Zara inside, then retrieved his rifle from his saddle. Stay low, he instructed, positioning himself near a window. I'll try to talk them down, but if shooting starts... I understand. Zara checked her pistol, her hands steady. The riders approached cautiously, fanning out as they neared the cabin. Isaac recognized Frank Durbin, Harrington's foreman, leading the group. Calloway, Durbin called out. We know you're in there. Come out and bring the Taylor woman with you. What do you want, Durbin? Isaac shouted back. Mr. Harrington wants a word with the lady about her property. Isaac exchanged a glance with Zara. He's had 2 weeks to talk to you in town. Why the urgency now? We're just the messengers, Durbin replied, but the smirk in his voice belied the innocent words. Come on out, peaceful-like, and nobody needs to get hurt. That's not going to happen, Isaac called back. Miss Taylor isn't interested in selling. Ride back and tell Harrington she'll be staying on her land. There was a pause, then Durbin's voice, harder now. Have it your way, Calloway. The first shots came seconds later, bullets splintering the window frame inches from Isaac's head. He returned fire, aiming carefully to conserve ammunition. Zara crouched beside him, her face pale but determined. When a man tried to circle around to the back of the cabin, she fired through a rear window, her shot going wide but forcing him to retreat. Not bad, Isaac said with a grim smile. I told you my father taught me to shoot, she replied, reloading her pistol with steady hands. The exchange of gunfire continued as the sun sank lower. Isaac managed to hit one of Harrington's men in the shoulder, sending him retreating with a howl of pain. But they were outnumbered and running low on ammunition. As darkness fell, the shooting stopped. Isaac could make out the shadows of Harrington's men, positioned in a semicircle around the cabin, waiting. They'll rush us at dawn, he said quietly to Zara. When the light's still poor, but they can see enough to aim. She nodded, her face illuminated by a thin shaft of moonlight coming through the window. Despite the danger, Isaac was struck by her beauty, the determined set of her jaw, the intelligence in her eyes, the strength she'd shown throughout this ordeal. I'm sorry I got you into this, she whispered. Isaac shook his head. You didn't. I chose to help you because it was right, because Harrington has been bullying people for too long. He hesitated, then added softly, and because from the moment I cut you free from that rope, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. In the dim light, he saw her eyes widen, then soften. I've thought about you too, Isaac, more than I probably should, given our short acquaintance. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Nothing like mortal danger to speed up a courtship. She laughed softly, the sound incongruously joyful in their dire situation. Is that what this is? A courtship? I'd like it to be, he admitted, if we get out of this alive. When, she corrected, when we get out of this alive. And yes, I'd like that too. Their eyes held for a long moment, and Isaac felt an overwhelming urge to kiss her. But a shout from outside broke the spell. Calloway, you've got till dawn to surrender the woman. After that, we burn you out. Isaac moved back to the window, peering into the darkness. We need a plan. Zara joined him, her shoulder pressing against his. What about the back way, through the rocks? Isaac shook his head. They've got men positioned to cover it. We'd be shot before we made it 10 yards. He thought for a moment. There might be another way, though, more dangerous, but they wouldn't expect it. He explained his idea, a desperate plan that hinged on timing, surprise, and more than a little luck. Zara listened intently, asking questions about details, suggesting improvements. By the time they'd finalized the strategy, the moon had risen high above the rocky outcropping. You should rest, Isaac told her. I'll keep watch. Zara looked like she wanted to argue, but nodded instead. Wake me in a few hours. You'll need sleep too. She settled on the cabin's narrow cot, and Isaac took up position by the window. As the hours passed, his thoughts drifted between their precarious situation and the woman sleeping just feet away. Despite the danger, or perhaps because of it, he felt more alive than he had in years. Shortly before dawn, he gently woke Zara. She came alert immediately, her hand moving to her pistol before she recognized him. It's time, he whispered. She nodded, fully awake. I'm ready. They moved silently, gathering what they needed for their plan. As the first hint of light touched the eastern sky, they took their positions. Remember, Isaac said softly. Wait for my signal. Zara squeezed his arm, her touch conveying more than words could. Then she was gone, slipping into position at the rear of the cabin. Isaac took a deep breath, steadying himself for what was to come. Then he called out into the pre-dawn light. Durbin, I want to talk. Outside, Harrington's men stirred, preparing for the assault they'd promised at dawn. Nothing to talk about, Calloway, Durbin shouted back. Send out the woman, or we come in shooting. She's hurt, Isaac called, injecting desperation into his voice. The ride yesterday was too much for her. She needs a doctor. There was a pause, then. Throw out your guns, then come out with your hands up, both of you. I'll come out, Isaac replied, but she can't walk. You'll have to come in and get her. This was the gamble that Durbin's curiosity and confidence in their superior numbers would overcome caution. After a tense moment, Durbin called back. All right, throw out your rifle, then step out with your hands up. Any tricks, and we shoot you where you stand. Isaac tossed his rifle through the door, letting it clatter visibly on the ground outside. Then, hands raised, he stepped into the growing dawn light. Durbin and 3 of his men approached cautiously, guns trained on Isaac. The other 2 remained mounted, watching the perimeter. Where's the woman? Durbin demanded. Inside, Isaac said. On the cot. She's barely conscious. Durbin nodded to 2 of his men. Check it out, and be careful, could be a trap. As the men approached the cabin, Isaac tensed, ready. Everything depended on the next few seconds. The men entered the cabin, and for a moment there was silence. Then came a startled shout, followed by the distinctive sound of bodies hitting the floor. Durbin's head whipped toward the cabin. What the... Isaac didn't wait. He dove for his rifle on the ground as the back of the cabin erupted in flame and smoke. Zara had set off the distraction. They'd prepared a small fire, fed with green wood, to create maximum smoke, along with several small explosions from cartridges they had sacrificed. The 2 men Durbin had sent inside came stumbling out, coughing and disoriented from the smoke and the blows Zara had delivered with a heavy skillet when they'd entered. In the confusion, Isaac grabbed his rifle and fired at Durbin, hitting him in the leg. The foreman went down with a howl of pain just as Zara emerged from the side of the cabin, mounted on one of their horses and leading the other. Isaac ran to her, grabbing the reins and swinging into the saddle as bullets whizzed around them. They galloped away from the cabin, using the smoke and early morning shadows for cover. Behind them, Harrington's men scrambled to mount and give chase, But the surprise had worked. By the time they organized themselves, Isaac and Zara had gained precious distance. They rode hard, pushing their horses to the limit. Instead of heading back toward town, as Harrington's men would expect, they cut north, toward the mountains and the border with Montana Territory. "We did it!" Zara shouted over the pounding hooves, her face alight with the wild exhilaration of their escape. Isaac grinned back at her, his heart racing with more than just the danger. In that moment, with her hair flying free behind her and her eyes bright with triumph, she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. They rode until midday, stopping only when their horses needed rest. After watering the animals at a small stream, they took shelter in a grove of pines to consider their next move. "Harrington won't stop," Isaac said grimly. "He'll have men watching your property, the trail to my ranch, and probably the approaches to town." Zara nodded, her expression thoughtful rather than fearful. "We need to change the equation, take the fight to him instead of just reacting." Isaac raised an eyebrow. "That's dangerous thinking." "So is waiting for him to try again," she countered. "Next time, we might not be so lucky." She was right, and Isaac knew it. They couldn't keep running forever. Sooner or later, Harrington would catch up to them, or worse, burn them out of their homes while they slept. "What do you suggest?" he asked. Zara's blue eyes glinted with determination. "Harrington's power comes from fear and the belief that he's untouchable. We need to show people that's not true." "How?" "Evidence." She leaned forward intently. "His men tried to kill me, then blame me for Morris's death. There must be something connecting Harrington to these crimes, something we can bring to the territorial authorities if Sheriff Blackwell won't act." Isaac considered this. "Harrington keeps ledgers in his office at the Diamond Bar. If he's paying men to do his dirty work, then it would be in those books," Zara finished. "We need to get them." "Breaking into the Diamond Bar ranch house?" Isaac shook his head. "That's suicide." "Not if we're smart about it." Zara's mind was clearly racing ahead. "Harrington's holding a big party at his ranch next Saturday. I saw the announcements in town before everything happened. The house will be full of people, staff running around. It would be the perfect cover." Isaac stared at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You're something else, Zara Taylor." She grinned back, a hint of mischief in her expression. "Is that a compliment?" "Absolutely." He took her hand, suddenly serious. "But it's still incredibly dangerous." "Life is dangerous, Isaac." Her voice softened. "Especially out here, but that doesn't mean we stop living it." In that moment, surrounded by pine trees with the sound of the stream nearby and danger at their heels, Isaac gave in to the impulse he'd resisted in the cabin. He leaned forward and kissed her. Zara responded immediately, her free hand moving to his cheek as she returned the kiss with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I've wanted to do that since the moment you opened your eyes in the doctor's office," Isaac admitted. Zara laughed softly. "Even with my face all bruised and swollen?" "Even then." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You were the most determined, alive person I'd ever seen." Her expression softened. "I felt it too, this connection between us. I thought I was imagining it, or that it was just gratitude because you saved my life." "And now?" he asked. "Now I know it's much more than that." She smiled. "Though I am still very grateful you cut that rope." They spent the night in an abandoned trapper's cabin Isaac knew of, planning their next move while staying alert for any sign of pursuit. By morning, they had a strategy risky, but with a chance of success. "We'll need help," Isaac said as they prepared to leave. "People we can trust." Zara nodded. "Dr. Miller, for one. And perhaps Sheriff Blackwell?" "Blackwell's a good man, but he's cautious. He'd try to talk us out of it." Isaac secured their saddlebags. "But I have a few friends who've lost land to Harrington. They might be willing to help." They rode north for another day, circling around to approach Shoshone City from an unexpected direction. As night fell, they made their way cautiously to Dr. Miller's back door. The doctor's eyes widened when he saw them, quickly ushering them inside. "Thank God you're alive," he said, helping Zara to a chair. "The whole town's talking about the shootout at the line cabin. Harrington's men came back saying you'd both been killed in the fire." "Let them think that for now," Isaac replied. It gives us an advantage. Dr. Miller looked between them. What are you planning? They explained their idea, watching as the doctor's expression shifted from shock to thoughtful consideration. It could work, he admitted finally. But you'll need more than just the ledgers. You'll need testimony someone from inside Harrington's organization willing to talk. Who? Zara asked. Tom Jenkins might be your best bet. He was Harrington's bookkeeper until last month when they had some kind of falling out. Lives over in Rawlins now. Isaac nodded. I know Jenkins. Never seemed comfortable with Harrington's methods. He'd know what to look for in those ledgers too, the doctor added. As the night deepened, they refined their plan. Dr. Miller offered to ride to Rawlins the next day to speak with Jenkins, while Isaac and Zara would contact the others they needed. You can stay here tonight, the doctor said. No one will think to look for ghosts. After he'd gone upstairs, Isaac and Zara settled in the small sitting room. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty of their plan, Isaac felt a strange contentment. Zara sat beside him on the sofa, her head resting against his shoulder as they talked softly about what would come next. Are you afraid? He asked. She considered the question seriously before answering. Yes, but not enough to stop. You? The same. He brushed his lips against her temple. But for the first time in years, I'm also hopeful. Zara turned to face him, her expression earnest in the lamplight. Whatever happens, Isaac, I want you to know these past weeks, despite everything, have been the most alive I've felt in my entire life. He cupped her face gently. We're going to win this fight, Zara, and then we'll have all the time in the world. When he kissed her this time, it held a promise of a future they would build together once Harrington was defeated. The next morning brought news that strengthened their resolve. Dr. Miller returned from an early walk with a newspaper from the territorial capital. There's an investigation starting into land fraud across Wyoming, he explained, spreading the paper on the table. The governor's appointed a special prosecutor, if you can get evidence connecting Harrington to illegal activities. This could be bigger than just our fight, Zara said, reading the article with growing excitement. This could help everyone he's hurt. Over the next 3 days, they worked tirelessly, gathering allies and refining their plan. Dr. Miller returned from Rawlins with word that Jenkins was willing to help, not just to identify important documents, but to testify about Harrington's methods if they found evidence. By the time Saturday arrived, everything was in place. As dusk fell over Shoshone City, carriages began arriving at the Diamond Bar Ranch for Harrington's party. Among them was a wagon delivering extra supplies for the kitchen, driven by a man few would recognize as Isaac Calloway, with his freshly trimmed beard and borrowed clothes. In the back, hidden among crates of vegetables and bottles of wine, Zara waited, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. The wagon rolled past Harrington's guards without incident, stopping at the kitchen entrance where harried staff began unloading supplies. In the confusion, Isaac helped Zara slip unnoticed into the house through a servant's entrance. They made their way cautiously through the back corridors, avoiding the main rooms where guests mingled. Isaac had studied the house layout, based on information from a former servant, leading them unerringly toward Harrington's office. The door was locked, but Isaac made quick work of it with tools he'd brought. Inside, the office was dark and empty, the sounds of the party muffled by thick walls. "Watch the door," he whispered to Zara, lighting a small lamp and turning it low. She took up position while he began searching the desk, looking for the ledgers they needed. Outside, the party continued their unwitting cover as they committed what some would call theft and others justice. "Found them," Isaac said after several tense minutes, pulling a set of leather-bound books from a hidden compartment in the desk. Zara joined him, and together they began paging through the ledgers, looking for the evidence they needed. It didn't take long to find it: payments to Jed Morris and others for special services, entries about clearing certain properties, even a notation about handling the Taylor situation. "This is it," Zara whispered. "This proves everything." Isaac was carefully copying key pages when they heard footsteps approaching in the corridor. They froze, exchanging alarmed glances. The footsteps stopped outside the door, followed by the sound of a key in the lock. There was no time to hide, nowhere to go. The door swung open, and Victor Harrington stood framed in the doorway, his expression shifting from surprise to cold anger as he registered their presence. "Well," he said, closing the door behind him, "the rumors of your deaths were apparently exaggerated." His hand moved to the small pistol he carried in his jacket. "A mistake I'll remedy personally." Isaac shifted slightly, positioning himself between Harrington and Zara. "It's over, Harrington. We have the evidence of your crimes." The rancher laughed, the sound utterly without humor. "Evidence? Who do you think the authorities will believe? A respected businessman or a drifter, and an Eastern woman with delusions of becoming a rancher?" "The special prosecutor might be interested," Zara said, her voice steady despite the gun pointed in their direction. "Especially with your former bookkeeper ready to testify." That hit home. Harrington's confidence faltered momentarily before his expression hardened again. "Jenkins, I should have dealt with him more permanently." "Like you dealt with Jed Morris?" Isaac asked, "after he failed to kill Miss Taylor?" Harrington's smile was cold. "Morris was careless. I don't tolerate mistakes." He gestured with the gun. "Step away from my desk, now." Isaac didn't move. "You can't shoot both of us without raising an alarm. Your guests are just down the hall." "A regrettable incident," Harrington said smoothly. "I discovered trespassers in my office. I defended my property. Who would question it?" His finger tightened on the trigger. "Last chance, Calloway." What happened next unfolded in seconds. The office door opened again, and Sheriff Blackwell stepped in, his own gun drawn. "That's enough, Victor," he said. Harrington whirled, his gun shifting toward the new threat. Isaac seized the moment, launching himself across the desk and tackling the rancher. The gun discharged, the bullet embedding itself in the ceiling as they crashed to the floor. More people flooded into the room, Dr. Miller, Tom Jenkins, and several others. Among them was Judge Holbrook from the territorial court, his expression grave as he took in the scene. "What's the meaning of this, Thomas?" he demanded of the sheriff. Sheriff Blackwell nodded to the ledgers on the desk. "Evidence of multiple crimes, Your Honor. Murder, intimidation, land fraud. Been building the case for weeks, waiting for the right moment." Understanding dawned on Isaac and Zara simultaneously. The sheriff hadn't been inactive, he'd been gathering his own evidence, building a case that would stand up in court. "You knew?" Isaac asked, keeping Harrington pinned despite the man's struggles. "Suspected for years," Blackwell replied, "but couldn't prove it until Miss Taylor's arrival forced his hand." He nodded to Zara with respect. "Your ordeal was the catalyst we needed. When you two disappeared after the cabin incident, I knew you'd either surface with evidence or we'd be dead," Zara finished. "I had men watching," the sheriff assured her. "Wouldn't have let it come to that." Judge Holbrook had been examining the ledgers, his expression growing sterner with each page. "This is damning, Victor. Combined with witness testimony," he shook his head. "Your empire is finished." Harrington ceased his struggles, his face a mask of hatred as he looked at Isaac and Zara. "This isn't over." "Yes," Isaac said quietly. "It is." The next hours passed in a blur of statements and explanations. Harrington was taken to jail, his guests departing in scandalized whispers. The special prosecutor was summoned by telegraph, and plans were made for a full investigation of the Diamond Bar's business dealings. By dawn, Isaac and Zara found themselves sitting on the sheriff's office porch, exhausted but triumphant as the first light touched Shoshone City. "What happens now?" Zara asked, leaning against Isaac's shoulder. "Harrington will stand trial," he replied. "With the evidence we found and Jenkins' testimony, he'll likely spend years in prison." "I meant with us," she clarified softly. Isaac turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "That depends on what you want, Zara Taylor." Her blue eyes met his, unwavering. "I want to build a life here, on my father's land." She hesitated, then added with a small smile, "Our land, if you're willing." "Are you proposing to me, Miss Taylor?" Isaac asked, his heart racing. "I believe I am, Mr. Calloway." Her smile widened. "It's unorthodox, I know. Like everything else about you." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Which is why my answer is yes." The kiss they shared as the sun rose over Shoshone City sealed a promise that had begun the moment he'd cut her free from that rope, saving her life, and, unknowingly, his own heart. 1 year later, the Taylor Calloway ranch was thriving. Isaac and Zara had married in a simple ceremony at the small church in Shoshone City, with Dr. E. Miller giving away the bride and Sheriff Blackwell standing as best man. They'd combined their properties, building a new house that straddled the boundary line, a symbol of their united lives. The investigation into Harrington's dealings had led to the return of land to many who had been forced out, creating a community of small ranchers who worked together against the harsh Wyoming elements. Zara's business acumen proved invaluable as she helped organize a cooperative for selling cattle, giving them all better prices than they could have negotiated alone. On the anniversary of the day Isaac had rescued Zara from being dragged behind that runaway horse, they sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the valley in gold and crimson. "Any regrets?" Isaac asked, his arm around his wife's shoulders. Zara smiled, placing his free hand on her slightly rounded belly where their first child grew. "Not a single one." As darkness fell over the Wyoming landscape, stars appeared in the vast sky above their home. Isaac Calloway looked at the woman beside him, the woman he'd saved and who had saved him in return, and knew that cutting that rope had been the most important moment of his life. Sometimes, he reflected, the greatest journeys begin with a single, desperate act of courage. His had started the moment he'd spurred his horse faster to reach a woman in danger. And now, that journey had brought him home,